Well, good evening. I see by the proverbial clock on the wall it's 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to tonight's Constitution Week event. First we'll have Dr. Beth Hinga. We'll do a little welcome, and then we'll get on to the meat of the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is so nice to see all of these students here at this event. Thank you so much for making time in your schedule to be here for this important event. So on behalf of the administration and the faculty of Newberry College, welcome. And again, your presence here is important. And we do really appreciate, again, that you see this as an important event as well. So as you know, we're approaching the 250th anniversary of our Constitution and of our country. And so as we lead up into that time period, we are going to be having more events, and we're going to be talking more about our great country and its governance. And so this is just one of those events in a series of things that we'll be talking about. So this evening, we are very privileged to have one of our former state senators here. And so I think you are going to enjoy listening to him talk about his life and the things that he's experienced in the Senate and, of course, state government here in South Carolina. So without further ado, let me have Dr. Lambrese come back up, and he will discuss the evening's events with you.
Thank you. For those that I've not met, I'm Dr. Dennis Lambrese. I'm Program Coordinator for Political Science. We also have Professor Ringer with us, who teaches public administration, public policy programs, public not-for-profit programs. And we have our newest professor, Dr. Tony Dukes, who has just joined us this year. Is teaching online classes. Has a wealth of experience in state government and teaching at the college level, both at University of South Carolina and Francis Marion. So just there are resources for you as you need them moving forward. Several things that get to be real interesting in the process as we deal with these is we're at challenging times in this country, and the Founding Fathers were strong believers in the importance of educating the citizens about the documents that govern us, our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence. And in times of challenge, where we have so much polarization, it's amazing how people on all sides of the political agenda have different interpretations of the same language in the same documents. And so part of the reason we have these ongoing opportunities is to talk about what it really says, what it really means, the context. And like anything in life, we can all pick and choose what we want, but I think as college students and as citizens, we need to take it a bit more seriously and understand the context of what takes place. It won't make a difference in my lifetime, but all of you will in one way or another be impacted by the political process, by challenges to our systems of government from whatever arena they come, and the importance of understanding our founding documents. So we'll be having more of that. As Dr. Hinga said, next year at the 250th birthday, we'll be having more activities, and look forward to your participation. One of the things we started a couple years ago was having a student competition on what the Constitution means to me. First year we had nobody submitted a paper. The second year we had a few more. This year we had our largest number submitting. And on the one hand, it's an extra paper, you got to write. But one of the challenges you have as students is learning our system of government, learning what governs you, what determines what your job is going to be, what determines how you can do your job, right? And that's why these things are important. So our second place award this year goes to Jordan C. Jordan, if you'd come on up. Pardon the printing on the outside. She gets a $200 stipend for coming in second place. Jordan is a double major in political science and English. She'll be graduating in December. She's very active with the debate team. And I would encourage any and all of you that plan on going into public life of any source to look at the debate team and argumentative speech. That's a very critical skill set to have. She's also been gaining experience with Parker Pope here in town as a legal assistant runner, learning stuff that she goes on important to do. those opportunities are available, and we try to work with you as best we can. Her presentation essay was quite interesting because she started out saying she didn't know why it was important. And that was a very honest statement. A lot of people don't know much about it or why. But she went on in her essay to explain how over time, with experience and learning in class, it became more important, understand the importance of it. And that's what learning should be about, developing. So we thought that was a very interesting approach. So again, congratulations. Our first place winner is Barbora Havlova. Would you want to come forward, please? Yeah. Barbara is from the Czech Republic. She's currently a junior at Newberry College, majoring in business administration. As a student athlete, she's a member of the women's tennis team. Outside of academic and athletics, her passion is coaching. And what I liked about this, more important than coaching, to help others grow and develop self-confidence. That's important. She'll be reading her presentation, and for first place, she gets a $300 stipend, and congratulations for your efforts. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'll be reading my essay on the importance of the U.S. Constitution and why it's so important for all citizens. On November 17th, 1989, my parents, who were college students at that time, joined a protest as fog hung heavy over the street of Prague. Chants, optimism, and anxious excitement filled the air. A nonviolent march in honor of International Students' Day swiftly descended into a brave demonstration against decades of communist control. Batons and shields were used by the police to push back. My father was hit, but the crowd refused to leave. They all called for democracy, freedom, and a life in which they could be heard. Thanks to the bravery of regular students who were prepared to take any risks, the regime was overthrown in a matter of weeks, and Czechoslovakia started along the path to democracy. For my parents, that day became a defining moment. They risked their safety because they believed freedom was worth fighting for, not only for themselves, but also for future generations. Now I'm the same age as my parents were in 1989, but totally in a different place. As an international student in the United States, I am not a citizen, and so cannot vote or fully engage in American democracy. Nonetheless, I benefit from the protections of the United States Constitution every day. I can talk openly in class, challenge views, and practice my beliefs without fear. I study in a society ruled by rules rather than a single leader, and even as a visitor, I see personally how the Constitution promotes stability and defends individual rights. This perspective emphasizes why the United States Constitution is so vital to all Americans. Unlike in many other regions of the globe, where rights can be lost with a change in the government, the Constitution creates a long-term framework founded on fundamental values. The First Amendment ensures individual freedoms, such as free speech, religion, and the right to assemble. It upholds the rule of law, guaranteeing that no leader is above the law, and embodies the idea of limited government. The Constitution protects these rights and establishes a system of checks and balances, allowing each generation of Americans to engage in a democracy while remaining free of abuses of power. When I think of the Constitution, I typically remember my parents. In 1989, they protested against the government that denied them basic rights. Today, I live in a nation where such rights are recognized and protected by the highest law of the land. For me, the Constitution is more than just a document from America. It represents what people all around the world desire: dignity, fairness, and freedom. For Americans, its significance is definitely considerably higher. The Constitution unites a diverse society, providing people from all backgrounds with the same fundamental rights. It allows citizens to hold leaders responsible, speak out without fear, and guarantee that the government works for the people. Without it, the liberties that Americans frequently take for granted would be precarious and unpredictable. The United States Constitution teaches us that the freedom is not assured. Rather, it must be actively maintained and appreciated. Although I am not a citizen of the United States, I have a strong respect for the Constitution's role in protecting all Americans' rights and liberties. It reminds us that democracy, while imperfect and fragile, can continue when supported by laws that protect every individual and guarantee that the government serves the people rather than the other way around. In a world where freedom is not guaranteed and conflicts endanger fundamental human rights, the Constitution serves as a light. It is more than simply a series of laws on paper. It is a safeguard for liberty, a guide for justice, and a framework for holding authority responsible. It guarantees American people the freedom to think, talk, worship, and participate in government without fear. For me, it emphasizes the importance of democracy and the need to protect it, both at home and throughout the world. By honoring the Constitution, we remember not just the nation's past, but also the sacrifices and heartfelt battles that secured the liberties we have today, ensuring that the courage of those who defend a liberty continues to inspire future generations. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we had a long conversation about this presentation as well. I'm not a citizen. But it's amazing how we Americans tend to take things for granted and don't recognize and appreciate the freedoms that we have. And that essay was beautifully written and explains why the rest of the world looks to America as an opportunity. I was talking to a colleague of mine a few weeks ago, and he recounted a story where he met a person who was an immigrant, and they started talking about freedoms in America. And the immigrant says, you know, I had America to come to. Who would you go to? The challenge. So at this point, Parker, I'd like to come up and do your well-rehearsed presentation. Most of you know Parker. He's a baseball student here at Newberry College, and glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Like Dr. Lambrey said, my name is Parker Murgo, and I'm the oldest grandson of Senator Nikki Setzler. Senator Nikki Setzler was born in Asheville, North Carolina, to Verna Parker Setzler and Harry Earl Setzler. He graduated from Brooke and Casey High School and received an undergraduate and law degree from the University of South Carolina. He married his college sweetheart, my Nana, Ada Jane Taylor, and together they have four daughters, 4 sons-in-laws, and 9 grandchildren. Senator Setzler began his legal career as an associate with attorney Harry Lightsey Jr. before opening his own law office where he continues to practice. He also worked with his parents until their passing at their local hamburger and hot dog restaurant, Ed's Drive-Thru. Senator Setzler's tenure in the South Carolina Senate began in 1976, and he has represented the counties of Aiken, Bamberg, Barnwell, Calhoun, Edgefield, Saluda, and Lexington. Over 48 years, he served with more than 142 individuals, served as chairman of the Senate Education Committee for 12 years, and served as the Senate Democratic Minority Leader for 8 years. At the time of his retirement, he was the longest-serving state senator currently holding office in the nation, and the legislative process, or the longest-serving state senator in the South Carolina's history. His passion for consensus building in the legislative process has led to the reformative legislation, but he will be forever known as a true statesman, one who spoke with knowledge, with passion, and with heart. In his farewell remarks to the Senate, he implored others the sanctity of the Senate, the traditions, and the decorum should be respected, preserved, and defended. His portrait now hangs in the South Carolina State House. It is therefore with great honor that I introduce to you my grandfather, the Honorable Nikki G. Setzler, as our guest speaker tonight.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. You just don't know how much. My wife, Ada Jane, is with me. We've been married 56 years, which is probably a record in many instances in today's world. I will tell you very honestly that I was pretty nervous. I've served 48 years in the Senate, and I've spoken a lot on the floor of the Senate and across the state of South Carolina. But I was about as nervous as I could be when Parker talked me into doing this tonight to come talk to y'all, although it is thrilling to talk to young people. And I got okay earlier today until about 2 o'clock. I decided, you know, I might need to check out a couple of these people that I'm going to be with tonight, because we had dinner beforehand with your professors. And thank you for having me here, all of you that were at dinner. So I decided I'd look at your president and see about him. And he's sitting in the back, and I appreciate that. Now, keep in mind, I'm already nervous about speaking, and the first thing I see is he's the director of competitive speech and debate. Now, you're talking about instant nervousness when you see that he's the guy who teaches it, and you're going to be standing there talking. But I am thrilled to be here with you. It's a real honor. The Constitution, and what an incredible essay that you wrote. Tremendous. I don't even need to talk after you finished. We're here to celebrate and to begin the celebration of Constitution Week. Tomorrow is the day that the Constitution was signed. So we're each year between September 17th and 23rd, we celebrate Constitution Week. That what our forefathers did when they developed this document known as the Constitution. It is based on compromise, which a lot of people never think about and never realize how much compromise was involved in that. It's a living document. It's been amended 27 times, counting the 10 in the Bill of Rights after the Constitution was done. South Carolina had 4 signers to the Constitution. The Constitution, as I said, was based on compromise. There was a debate between what the role of the federal government was and what the role of the state government was. There was a debate on how the President of the United States would be elected, whether it would be by popular vote or by a representative vote. And so what did they do? They compromised and they formed the Electoral College, which we have today. They had a debate between the small states and the large states about representation in Congress. And some of the states, the small states, wanted it to be equal, same number from each state. Of course, the larger states who had the population wanted it to be on population. So what did they do? They compromised, and they created the House of Representatives based on population. They created the Senate based on a certain number from each state. So that document and our rights under that document, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because there's not only rights, there's responsibilities under the Constitutions and the amendments to it. But it is, as he said earlier, it is extraordinarily relevant to the world we live in today and what is transpiring in our society and in our world. If we have that Constitution is the basis of what we're doing. Now, I know some of you are sitting there because I can read your minds. Jane and I have 4 grown daughters and 9 grandchildren, so I'm used to dealing with young people and students. You're saying, well, what's this old gray-headed fellow got in relation to us? How does he relate to us? He doesn't know what we think. I was in your shoes when I was in college. I went to the University of South Carolina, as Parker said, undergraduate, and majored in political science, and then went to law school. But I was raised in Casey, West Columbia, been there all my life, and I went to the public schools there, as Parker mentioned, before I went to college. And when I was in college, I was your same age. Now, I'm a lot older than you are now, but I can relate to you. I did the same things that you did. I went to class. I also partied like you do sometimes, and went to football games and had tailgates and participated in sports and went out socially. So I understand where you cometh from, and when you have 4 daughters, as they grow up, you certainly understand where each one of you come from. I was raised by my mother and father, who neither one had a college education, but they had more than a college education. They had a real caring for people, and they wanted to be sure the one thing that I did was get a college education and leave college and go to law school if that was my dream of what I wanted to do. So we had a hamburger hot dog restaurant in Casey, West Columbia called Ed's Drive-Thru. It was the icon of that community. That's where everybody went. This is in the days before Hardee's and Chick-fil-A and all of these now restaurants that are chain operated. This was a homegrown place where I started catching curve when I was 8 years old. I say all that to say this to you. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I came up hard, but I had parents who taught me hard work. They taught me love of community. They taught me about caring about other people. And then in 1969, I married this lady that's sitting over here to my left. And as I said to you, we've been blessed to be together 56 years, and we have 4 daughters and 9 grandchildren. Now, how did I end up in the South Carolina Senate? And I want to talk about that a little bit for a minute before we talk about what I think are some important things about the Constitution and the amendments to the Constitution. In 1976, I filed at the age of 30 years old to run for the South Carolina Senate. And I will tell you, standing here today, I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into. I will be just as candid as I can with you. I had no idea. 30 years old. That's probably 8 years older than some of you, maybe 10 years old. So think about it. In 8 or 10 years, are you going to run for the South Carolina Senate? Are you going to run for public office and commit your life to public service? Yes, I think some of you probably will. At the age of 31, in November of 1976, I was fortunate enough to be elected to the South Carolina Senate. I had paged in the Senate 12 years earlier when I was in college, in law school. 12 years after I paged, I'm sitting there as a member and actually didn't know what I was still into. We ran, as Parker mentioned, at that time in 5 counties, Lexington, Aiken, Bamberg, Barnwell, and Edgefield County, 300,000 people. And that's before you had these things. Okay, we ran the first television ad in a state Senate campaign in the history of South Carolina. And I'll tell you the great part about public service. There's lots of it. But one of the great parts is you know and you meet people. And I've always, in my 48 years that I was there, represented an area that was both rural and urban. Not everybody had that benefit because some people lived in big cities in South Carolina and all their constituents were there. I had the opportunity to have rural and urban voters, so I had a broader view, in my opinion, but you get to grow and meet people. And you learn. And what we did until the day I left the Senate is every time we had an election, we went door to door. We went and knocked on people's door. And let me tell you, if you don't think somebody will tell you what they think on their front door, they will, because you're on their territory and you can't get away. And so we set up a system with my best friend and his wife, and we'd walk the blocks and we'd swap the car keys in the middle of the block and drive around to the next street. And I'm talking about, I'm not talking about one subdivision, I'm talking about 5 counties that we went all through door to door. An incredible, incredible experience. The only problem is, the older you get, the longer you serve, every election, then you get, we're waiting to see you when you're coming by the house. You know, and that's a difficult thing to do. I was fortunate enough, I ran, I wasn't one of these people that got elected and all of a sudden I had no opposition the rest of my career. I ran and got elected 12 times, 4-year terms for 48 years. Of those 12 times, I had an opponent 11 of those 12 times. 11 of 12 times. So when people talk about term limits, I'm not for term limits. The people have term limits every time that candidate runs. And that's up to the people to decide whether or not a candidate is the person they want them representing them. That's my personal belief, and anything I say today is in fact my personal belief. I will tell you, I was incredibly blessed, and I could stand here and talk for hours about the stories of going door to door, the people I've met, the things I've done. But as Parker knows, I tend to be a little long, and I spoke one time, and my second daughter, who's grown, was in the audience, and I kept looking out there, and all of a sudden she's going, you know, you're filibustering. But let me give you an example. When I filed in 1976 on Monday, And the reason I filed, and you need to be aware of this, because you're not going to agree with every elected official. That's an important part. You're not supposed to agree with all of the elected officials. Filing was on Monday morning. It closed at 12. AJ and I got ready to go to bed that night, and I looked at her and I said, I got to go file tomorrow. And I might get emotional about it. And she said, really? I said, yeah. Because if I don't file, I ran against an incumbent in the primary. I said, and I didn't agree with what he was doing on the issues. I didn't agree with what he was doing in the development of our community. I said, if I don't go file, I'm just exactly like Bubba, who sits in front of the filling station in a chair and smokes a cigarette and complains about everything else that's going on in society, and he's not registered to vote and doesn't vote. And to me, that's the same thing as if you're not going to participate, then don't be complaining. You got an opportunity to be a part of the process and be a vital part of that process. And I'll tell you one other quick story. I did file the next morning. And when I filed, I'd never been to Bamberg County. I don't know if any of you are from Bamberg County or not. So when I filed, I said, okay, I got to do this. I'll drive to Bamberg. I drive to Bamberg, and Bamberg is a rural county at that time. And I go across the railroad tracks when I get into Bamberg. It's noon, and there's a Hardee's there. The Hardee's is absolutely packed. I mean, it is slammed. So I go in, I get my hamburger and drink. I said, okay, Nikki, you got to do this. There's nowhere to sit. And there's this little elderly lady who's sitting by herself in the booth. I walked up to her and I said, do you mind if I join you? She said, no, have a seat. And she was probably 77, 75. And I thought to myself, well, you might as well go ahead and do it, buddy. You plunk down the money. So I looked at her and I said, I'm Nikki Setzler. I'm running for the South Carolina Senate. Now keep in mind, this is the first person after I filed. That lady looked at me, and I'll never forget it, because I knew then that I'd done the right thing. She said, I got one question for you. I said, what is that? She said, are you a Christian? I said, yes, ma'am, I am. That wasn't enough for her. She said, oh, no. I don't mean do you say you one, are you really one? That was my introduction to South Carolina politics. Her name was Miss Saunders, and her family ran the lumber business. I would never forget that lady till the day I leave this earth. So those are the kind of things that you do and you mean, and I was blessed. I was there 48 years, and my DNA was built to serve in the South Carolina Senate and serve in public service. And I hope some of your DNA wants you to do that. I thrived in the process because I'm a bipartisan person. I don't think party matters. Political parties are part of the problem we got in government throughout. But I worked with everybody and respected their opinions, and we worked together. Again, goes back to what the Constitution is built on, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And that's compromise, because you're not right every time, and I'm not right every time. And you got different life experiences than I got, and then you got, and you put them all together, and you come out with a better product if you do that. Now, I will tell you, I had some great opportunities serving in the South Carolina Senate. I got to go to Japan on an educational exchange trip and see how they educate young people over there. Elementary school, when they get out of school in Japan, they go straight to a tutor because they are so competitive, because when you get out of school there, and if you don't get in college, then your first job is your job for the rest of your life. If it's a cab driver, if it's a grocery store, you're hung for life. So it's a system that I would not want to be a part of. I got to chair the Senate Education Committee for 12 years and be able to see people and talk to teachers and professors and higher education and make changes in the educational system in South Carolina, both at K-12 and higher ed, which impacted the future. I got the opportunity to serve as co-chair of the investigation committee of the nuclear facility that was closed in Fairfield County that was halfway built when what was Scana, now Dominion Energy, and the Santee Cooper closed it, and it went bankrupt. And we had a 2-year investigation, and I was the minority leader at that time. Shane Massey was the majority leader. And we spent 2 years, day in and day out, investigating that, and the things that came to light would not have come to light if we hadn't done it. I had the opportunity to bring Amazon to Lexington County, help bring BMW and Boeing and Scout and all of these big industries that provide jobs to the people of South Carolina. But I got to tell you that the thing that probably touched me more was every single day when I got up and went to the South Carolina Senate, I had the chance to improve and change the life of somebody in South Carolina. What greater thing could you do in your life than be able to help your fellow man each and every day when you were at work? And it was an incredible, incredible experience, and I thank God for it. I was just, the point I'm trying to make about relating to y'all, I was an ordinary person who God gave an extraordinary opportunity to go and serve people and help improve people's lives. I will tell you, and Parker knows this, on my desk in my law office, Payne Stewart is a pro golfer. Y'all may be too young to remember Payne Stewart, but he won the United States Open in Pinehurst, North Carolina, which is one of the 4 major championships, and got killed shortly thereafter in a plane crash. And there's a trophy of his motion when he won. And on that statue in my office is, quote, it says, quote, "The thing about dreams is sometimes you get to live them," end quote. I got to live my dream, and I hope and pray for each one of you, you get to live your dream, whatever it may be. I don't know whether you want to be a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, a lawyer, a coach, whatever it may be. But I hope that you have that opportunity. But I also hope, because we need you, we need for you to be interested in public service, and I would implore you to do that. Now, let's talk about, for just a moment, the United States Constitution. Lots of people know and talk about their rights under the United States Constitution. The right to assemble, the right of religion, freedom of religion, the right to assemble, bear arms, and due process. That's just some of them. But everybody knows what their rights are. But let's talk a few minutes about not what your rights are, but under that document that has created the greatest democracy in history. What are your responsibilities? What's your role as a citizen of this great country that we live in under that Constitution? I'll give you what I think that Constitution says to us directly and indirectly by the way that our forefathers wrote it. I think, first of all, you need to know the Constitution, and obviously you do for these ladies who won, and your rights, and support the principles of the Constitution. That was not real hard. The second one is, I think the Constitution envisions you staying informed, knowledgeable about what's going on. Now let's talk about it just a minute, because this is one where the age difference does make a whole lot of difference between. No offense to the print press, nobody reads the newspaper anymore, except, I see you laughing, except us old folks who get up in the morning and make coffee, and then we read it digitally now because they won't deliver it to you at the house because they can't. Okay, but you gotta look for your news. Okay, for most young people, And most people now with the technology, they're getting their news off of this or off the internet. You know, whether it's Instagram, X, TikTok, whether it's AI, podcast, YouTube, nothing wrong with any of them. But you got to be real sure that the information you are getting, one, is not fake news. And let me give you an example of that, and this deals with Parker's daddy. The first, not this past weekend, weekend before, on Sunday after the football games in South Carolina, on my Instagram account came up a big picture, and this is no reflection on Clemson or Dabo, but it comes up a big picture of Dabo Swinney, and it says, Dabo fired. I instantly sent it to Parker's daddy, and he texted me back and said, that's probably a scam. Guess what? That's what it was. So when you read something on one of these digital mediums that we use, you got to be sure it's not fake. You got to dig deeper. Get the true story. And talking about AI, I was in Colorado Springs last week for a conference, and a day and a half of it was on AI. Incredible. But there was a lady there who had done a startup, sold and made enough money. She's investing in other startups, and what was she doing? She was creating an image on AI of herself so that she had somebody to talk to when she wanted to talk to herself. And she showed it to us, and it worked. So you got to be aware of what the information you get. And I know I'm beating that horse to a drum, but I see people all the time. I've got family members, they'll come up and say, look at this about this politician. And it ain't any more truth to it than a man in the moon. And I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Know the issues in your community and in the state. Just you got to know what's going on. It's important outside the world that we live in on a daily basis. Let me tell you what goes on in the political world. You've got fancy names for bills. We're all guilty of it. We're going to pass a bill that says, the name of it is Free College Tuition for All Students in South Carolina. And my gosh, it doesn't even really have anything to do with tuition. But everybody thinks, oh, that's a great thing. Well, if you look at the postcards you get in the mail, or you look at somebody else and it says, Free College Tuition Committee. Well, guess what? That's a bunch of money by some third party that's got something that they want to do. Or it's money from out of state. We call that dark money. The money a political candidate has to raise and spends has to be reported. You can go on the internet tomorrow and look at any public official in this state, and you can find out what money they've raised, who it was from, when they raised it, the name and address of the person that gave it, and where they spent it. But you can't with dark money, because the Supreme Court has said you can't make them disclose it. That's tragic. We have more money come into South Carolina on issues that affect your daily life from out of state, from people who are interested in one issue, whatever that issue may be, and they don't care about what else happens in this state as long as they get their issue. So be aware of dark money and what it does. I just got to say this too. When you're dealing with issues, don't be a robot. Please, don't be a robot. You're our future, and I'll mention that in a minute. Robots just read something and they go do it, period. They don't think about it, you know? I'm a guy that's not big on party. You know, I ran 12 times and got elected. Not once did I see a voter come in that was named Republican Party that voted. Or not once did I see a voter come in that was named Democratic Party that voted. They have their platforms and their issues, and that's important. But if you're thinking you're not going to agree with either one of them all the time, regardless of what your party label is, I'm one of those who believes, as I've talked to at supper or dinner. I believe if you, in government, and I think the Constitution is based on this, if you govern by a large group of the body that you're serving in from the far right or from the far left, you don't get near as good a government if you did what we did here in South Carolina for a long time, is you put together the middle. You take the moderates on the right and the moderates on the left, put them together in a bipartisan coalition, and you get better government every day of the week. But remember, that whole process is based on compromise. Know who your elected officials are. Know them. Know them by name. Know what their office is. Know what they stand for. Hold them accountable. Communicate with them. I love talking to young people because they energized me and still do, because you're so full of energy and you got such bright new ideas that are needed. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. That's their job. That was my job. Participate in the process. That's another one of the responsibilities under the Constitution. When they drafted that Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the 27 amendments, they envisioned that people were going to participate. That's the whole purpose, was to protect your rights and your responsibilities. Well, if you're going to protect your rights, you better be at the ballot box. Don't just register and not go vote. Register and vote. And I implore you, I ask you, consider running for office. Each one of you has got something to offer, whether it's on school board, city council, county council, state legislature, in Congress. We need you. And we need new ideas every day. I think that's critically important. Another responsibility I think is very clear in the Constitution is that you have to respect the views and the rights of others. Just because you got a right doesn't mean you got a right to trample my right. And every day in the Senate, we did that. We respected each other. You got to have civility and respect in government. I don't care if you disagree with somebody, just have civility and respect that their opinion's different from yours. I ought not tell this story, but I'll tell it anyway. In the Senate, and I'm going to give you an example. We had a great member of the Senate, sat beside me on the front row. He sat here, I sat in the middle, and then the other senator to my right on the front row. And we had another member of the Senate who this senator really, I mean, you couldn't, if you'd asked a million issues, they would have never agreed on any of the million issues. And every time this other senator got up to speak, he'd say, and I mean, we're as close as he are to where he's speaking, he'd say, "He's crazy." I said, "You can't say that." And I mean, he'd say it loud enough that the other senator could hear. "He's crazy." I said, "Senator, you got to understand one thing. He ran just like we did. He got elected like we did. He represents the views of the people that he represented. And he's got a right to have his position known publicly and in this body." And that's the way it's supposed to learn. We learn from each other's differences. Each one of you've got a different life experience that you can bring to the process. You got a different thought process. And you're going to have somebody that you just absolutely, totally disagree with, and that's okay. But respect them, debate them in a civil manner, and I'll bet you before it's over with, you learn something from them, and they learn something from you. And everybody's better off when you do, and I think that's one of our responsibilities. And clearly, the Constitution gives us rights, but it also certainly expects and implies that we not abuse those rights. Don't abuse those rights. Any response in political discussion has to be a reasonable and a responsible response. I'll be quick and finish. The other thing, responsibility I think you got, I told you, the Constitution is built on compromise. There is absolutely, that's not debatable in my mind. It's there. The history books will tell you that, and I think your professor will tell you that. It's built on compromise. The legislative process that I worked in is built on compromise, supposedly. Now, it's getting really partisan now, and that makes it much more difficult, but it's built on compromise. Congress, as the founders envisioned it, is built on compromise in Congress between the House members, between the Senate members, and then between the House and the Senate. I think also the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the amendments were built on what I term our constitutional spirit. The constitutional spirit is the love of this country, this United States that we live in, of the freedoms that we have, that the ability that we have to live in a democracy and be free to do what we want to, but we have to be responsible. I call that the constitutional spirit, love of country. And we just regretfully remembered one of those days where I think constitutional spirit and love of country was best shown, and that was on 9/11. When those two airplanes came into those towers, those folks didn't run. They didn't say, that's not my responsibility. I'm a fireman. I'm a policeman. I'm a doctor. I'm a nurse. They didn't run the other way. They ran to it. That's our constitutional spirit. That's our love of country that we have in this United States. So, I've said a lot. I will leave you with a couple of things. One, I think we're fortunate to live in the country we're in. I give thanks every day that I live here and live in South Carolina, live in Casey, West Columbia. You couldn't drag me out. You'd have to have a tractor to drag me out of Casey, West Columbia. But that's because I love my community, I love my state, and I love my country. But you know what? Those of you sitting here tonight, the students, you're our leaders. You're our future. I want you to hear me again now. You are our leaders. You are our future. It's not with us. It's not with them. It's with you. We're in a whole different world. We're in a world that changes instantly with the technology that we have today. I hate to tell you, the rest of us, we might know how to use it, but we don't understand it like you do. And we need you. You are our leaders, and we trust you. And I want you to hear me say that. We trust you. I was one of you that never thought I would be a leader. We trust you. Lift that mantle of leadership when you leave this college. Take it with you as you go. Do it with respect and with dignity for your fellow man. Do it with the knowledge that you individually don't have all the answers, and that you learn from other people and their experiences. Do it with a compromise spirit, and do it with a constitutional spirit. As my wife likes to say, be the best that you can be of whatever you want to be. Be the best of whatever you want to be. God created each one of us differently. We're not robots, and we each have different thoughts, and we have different views. The Constitution not only recognizes that, the Constitution embraces those differences, those different thoughts, those different ideas. The Constitution envisions creating a better country that we live in every day. As we used to say in the Senate, when we were dealing with major legislation in an arena, we were doing things for a generation and a future that we would never live to see. That we would never live to see, but we were doing it for those future generations. We live in the greatest country there is. You are our future. I just say to you, take the Constitution as your guide and go forth and lead us. And we will support you in your leadership. We need you, we want you, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Why is it important to know about American history, American government? Because as you listen to people like Senator Setzler talk, you realize he came across in government at a time when there were drastic changes taking place in South Carolina government. We went from each county having its own senator to counties being represented by one senator who may represent both urban and rural areas. We changed the way we did local government with the 1975 Home Rule Act, which changed how local governments are run, changing the forms of government, structures of government. All of those things came about during that time frame. Understanding the importance of running for office. You'll never have a more humbling experience than participating in a political process. I didn't have as long service as a senator had, but I had my time in the barrel, as they say, and I got involved in a runoff in my first election, and I went around introducing myself, knocking on doors, and I met this fellow for the first time, and he said, "I voted for you the first time," and I said, "Well, thank you very much, I appreciate your vote." And he said, "Well, don't get a big head about it. The only reason I voted for you is I knew them other two fellows." So it can be a very humbling experience doing that, but it's very, very important to do that. His comments about the internet. We all know about what Philadelphia Karen, grabbing the ball from the kid and making that big argument, right? If you watch closely, in some of the clips you see on YouTube, guess who they have posing for Philadelphia Karen? Elizabeth Warren, a Democratic senator who's somewhat liberal perspective. That's embedded in the video, and if you don't know the difference, you get those wrong impressions. Critically important. Educate yourself and vote, and I think one of the challenges that your generation has more than any is you have more information to sift through rather than less information. And how do you know what's true? And I can't emphasize enough, and I appreciate the senator saying, look for the truth. Just don't take it at first glance and things of that nature. And a couple quotes that are important. George Washington, in his farewell address in 1797, warned about the role of parties and how if we're not careful, parties will become our priority, not our nation. They never envisioned this idea of professional parties and professional politicians. Our leaders had the spirit that the senator talked about of civic virtue, of giving back, of contributing, not for personal gain, but for the betterment of communities. An example of what our founding fathers wanted for people to be like when they served in office. Dwight Eisenhower in 1959 said, in effect, that when our privileges become more important than our principles, we soon lose both. Challenges that we face. And Abraham Lincoln, among others, has claimed to have said, America will never fall from the outside. We'll always defend ourselves. If we fall, we'll fall from the inside because we lose that sense. And the final, because it's all Constitution Week, Ben Franklin was approached after the Constitutional Convention, and somebody says, "Mr. Franklin, what kind of government do we have?" He said, "Well, you have a republic if you can keep it. It is an experiment. And it relies on people with that spirit of service to make it successful and move forward." And being a resident of South Carolina, I appreciate the service and contributions you made because I have experienced that firsthand. And so that's why we learn. That's why we want to understand these things. Because when we have people that come up, I'm a dinosaur, right? But they've lived through times of drastic changes that change the way you are governed today, and you will see those same changes in your lifetimes. So take advantages to learn, to question, to challenge. That's what education's all about. So thank you very much. A couple final comments. If you've not done the sign-in sheets, all the classes to get credit for those of you that are in Professor Eshelman's class, there's a yellow sheet to sign in for her constitutional law class. If you like this idea of debate and dialogue, we're trying something new on Thursday night, 7 o'clock in Keller, room 100. We'll be having a debate on the Constitution. We have a local author who has published a book, basically it offers 95 suggestions on how to improve our Constitution. And so we'll be debating how relevant is the Constitution in today's world and the amount of change. Again, an opportunity to learn, and would encourage you to join us Thursday night, 7 o'clock in Keller, room 100. So again, Professor Ringer, anything you want to add? Okay, Professor Dukes, anything you want to add? Well, again, thank you very much. And one final thing, if you have not registered to vote and are interested in registering to vote, we have a table set up over here with applications to register to vote. And if you don't have time tonight, we have QR codes you can follow through, both for South Carolina. And if you're not a South Carolina resident, we have a QR code that goes to a national clearinghouse that can take you to whatever state you're from to register. We have an election coming up next year. It'll be a very critical election. So thank you all for your attendance tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you, Senator Setzler. We appreciate it.